Do you often find yourself scrolling through Steam, endlessly looking for a new game to play, but you can never find one? Me too. In fact, that was me just a few days ago. And while I was scrolling through, I remember seeing a game in a YouTube video once where the player was shooting guns while diving in slow motion through the air. And that looked fun, so I decided to find out what game that was. And it turned out it was Max Payne. So I played through the entire game, and it was amazing. So here's a review. So I played through the third game, so I missed whatever story was leading up to this point from the first two games since I've never played them. But from what I could gather, the main character, Max, is an ex-cop who takes on private security jobs. So the main story for this game is Max is hired by a rich family and we have to protect them. But very shortly into the game, that plan goes south and then it turns into a rescue mission for one of the family members. And the story has a bunch of unsuspecting twists as you go through it, so it kept me invested the entire time. I really liked it. But I think what really makes this story stand out from other games is how good Max's backstory is, and how as you go further into the game, you discover more and more about him. He's got a troubled backstory. With him losing his wife and daughter in the previous games, it's turned him into a washed-up drunk who's just trying to make amends for the past. There's a big chip on his shoulder, and you can't help but root for him the entire way, and there's really good character development for him the entire game. The gameplay is intense and pretty challenging, but it never feels too hard to where it's not enjoyable. The gunfights are really good and never feel too drawn out as well. The level design always keeps you moving forward throughout the gunfight, so you're always making progress throughout the level, which leads to a really good flow for the entire game. There's a bunch of different weapons that you get to use throughout the game, which leads to a lot of variety, which keeps everything interesting as well. I think my favorite part of the gunfights is that the game really rewards having good aim, and that every headshot is a kill, instead of having the enemies just be bullet sponges. And the bullet time events were awesome. There's a part where you're shooting rockets out of the sky in slow motion while hanging from a helicopter, or the time you're jumping from one moving train to another while being shot at. The entire game feels like a movie almost, but it never takes itself too seriously, which just leads to a ridiculously fun time. The movement and other mechanics all hold true to other Rockstar titles, like Grand Theft Auto and Red Dead Redemption, which feels polished. The graphics hold up pretty well for the game being over 11 years old as well. Since the gameplay is fairly simple with it just being about gunfights, there's not much more for me to say other than that it did everything really well. Now of course, every game has its faults, but for this game, I've only got one thing I could think of that could have been done better, and that's just that the sound design in some areas was a little off, with the gunshots not really having a sound that was directional to them. Instead they would sound muffled at points. But maybe that's just because the game is a little old and I'm used to the sound design in newer games. I'm honestly surprised that I've never played a game from this series before, and I went from not being able to find a game on Steam that interested me to playing this game and not getting enough of it. And I bet there's a lot more games out there that are special like this one, and maybe I'm just not good at finding them. I feel like I'm always looking for a game that's really complex and has a bunch of cool features like a Souls game or an Elder Scrolls game. But this game showed me that you don't need all the fancy mechanics and whatnot to enjoy a game. This game only has the one type of gameplay, and maybe that's why it wasn't as popular as other titles that came out around its time. But it does its one type of gameplay so well that I couldn't not recommend this game to somebody who just wants to sit down and have a good time playing a game without all the extra worries like having to level up a character and make choices that may or may not help you as you keep playing. So the next time you're endlessly scrolling on Steam, you should give this one a try. And as always, have a good one.